Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Speaker. I wonder if I could ask questions of the CFO about the financing models that are in the report. First of all, I want to say thank you very much. It's very good to finally see an analysis of the KPMG financing options. So am I correct in saying that the KPMG funding strategy, which was contained in the report that came to Executive last month, still left the financing of a subway plan 26% short of financing the full cost?
That's correct.
And what is the actual dollar value of that 26% shortfall in the financing scheme for a subway?
With the lower cost estimate provided by TTIL, it would be $700 million approximately, and with the higher estimate provided by the TTC, it would be $1.7 billion.
Okay, so $1.7 million is what TTC estimates as the the estimated cost. So $1.7 billion is the shortfall based on the TTC's estimated cost of the project. And that analysis, even with the let's just say $1 billion more or less shortfall, also included using TIFs, tax incentive financing, and using development charges to even come up with that financing model. Is that correct?
Yes, that was based on issuing bonds and equity on potential TIF and DC revenue streams.
And the third was to sell city lands, all the city lands on Sheppard Avenue. Is that also correct?
Yes.
Those were the three major sources of financing in the TTIL financing scheme. You expressed concerns about using TIFs and using development charges and selling TTC land or city lands to finance the Sheppard Subway. Could you please explain why you're concerned about financing a Sheppard Subway this way?
Well, with respect to TIFs and the DCs, first of all, you need legislative authority from the province. The initial attraction to TIFs for us when they were first proposed by the province was that we would capture the education portion of the growth. The province has been clear they will not give us the education portion along Eglinton and the SRT and Sheppard. The other thing is that the assumption is they're attractive because you get growth that you otherwise wouldn't get. The figures provided by Barry Lyons would indicate that 40% of that growth would happen in any case. It's just moving from one part of the city to the other. So you're cannibalizing some of your revenues for other city services. Most of the revenues are at the back end of the 50-year period that was proposed, and therefore you get, on a present value basis, you get those small amounts in the bond proceeds.
So you have concerns about using TIFs?
Yes.
And it needs provincial approval. On development charges, you also expressed concern about using all those development charges to put into the subway. Why is that?
The development charges would also require provincial approval. They do eat into our capacity to charge development charges for other things.
And you point out the fact that we need those development charges for other infrastructure. Is that correct?
Yes.
The other thing that this KPMG financing scheme suggests is a whole range of other taxes. On page 29, zone-based tolls, expressway tolls, hot lanes, VKT, parking tax, parking space levy, gas tax, etc., including payroll tax and so on. Which one of those taxes do we currently have the authority to levy?
We have authority to levy a PVT.
And we rejected that.
We just overturned.
Right.
And the parking space levy, if it's constructed correctly, we can impose that.
The parking space levy, though, you also expressed concerns about the Hempson report analyzed parking space levy. Could you tell us what the Hempson report...
Okay, that was your last question.
Do I get the answer? Yeah. So with respect to the parking tax levy, Hampson, first of all, said we could expect a backlash, particularly from those parking lot owners that provide free parking at the moment. So that would be all the parking in your BIAs, your malls, suburban malls, and plazas. Because they currently don't charge, so they would have to eat the charge. It would actually be an addition to their property taxes, or seen as so. They also said that it goes counter to our business development strategy, where we are limiting our tax increases to business. This would be seen as going counter to that. And those were the two main arguments. The province did have something similar called the commercial concentration tax. That lasted 3 years because there was a lot of backlash from the retail sector.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My questions are for Dr. Miller. If he's still with us?
Yes, he is.
I should just use a touch of my time to thank Professor Miller. I once in a while Skype with my in-laws in Vancouver. I find it a very exhausting form of communication, so I want to thank you for your input this morning. My question is about your mandate. I have 17.1 in front of me. You and your expert panel were to confine themselves to Sheppard Avenue, I believe is the recommendation. The most effective means of delivering rapid transit to the greatest number of riders with the funds currently allocated and with projected funds and potential sources on Sheppard. I'm wondering, Dr. Miller, therefore then, your expert panel, you and your fellow members, you couldn't really look at a comparison of impacts on bus travel around the subway route that only travels 5 kilometers along Sheppard before abandoning it, and say the bus routes that could be realigned to 25 stops on an LRT, because you weren't really allowed to look at how you could change someone's journey if they were coming down Brimley or Warden or Kennedy, where you couldn't really look at those types of journey improvements? Is that true?
Sorry, I missed.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble.
The question was, were we allowed to look at?
Were you allowed to?
North-south connection?
Yes. Well, what I'm getting at, Professor Miller, is there's been much questioning of, is the LRT running at a faster speed than the subway, and I think we all know the answer. Boy, we should by now. But the change in a journey, if you're coming from a subdivision far north of the Sheppard LRT, and you now have 25 stops and straight line buses that would be traveling to them, someone's journey could change by 30, 35 minutes, could it not? But you could not include that in this study under the terms, could you?
We did not look at any new analysis. I should note, however, that in the ridership forecasts prepared by city staff, connectivity to the LRT was taken into account. If the question is, by getting rid of bus stops and speeding up Sheppard Avenue, will that improve travel time for people currently traveling on buses? Yes, absolutely it would. It
would. So the bus journey changes as well, but that would be asking the TTC for new information that you couldn't really include that in your study.
I'm having increasing difficulty hearing, I'm afraid.
Oh, sorry. I'll stand very still to the microphone. You also would be constrained from looking at, for instance, the TTC can give us information such as not just comparing the costs and stats between a Sheppard LRT and a Sheppard Subway, the TTC, for instance, can provide us with information such as that while a Sheppard Subway would travel 8 kilometers, only 5 of them on Sheppard, serve 34,000 in new population, and go through one priority neighborhood. Once we combine the investment in both the Sheppard and the Finch West LRT, we're now serving 26 kilometers, 112,000 in new population, and 5 priority neighborhoods. But you couldn't include comparisons of the combination of the impact of Sheppard and Finch, could you? Oh, he's gone. So I suppose I could ask Mr. Byford then, with my remaining time, Madam Speaker. I'm having technological difficulty, but I wonder if you could stop my time, because I would like the answer to this question. Perhaps I'll ask the city manager, since as a staff lead he was overseeing, under the mandate of the expert panel, if, for instance, the expert panel said, let's put in our report a comparison of what we get for $1.9 billion and 26 kilometers if we compare the investment in both Finch West and Sheppard East, you would have to say to them, 1.9 billion serving 112,000 riders in 5 priority neighborhoods cannot be in this report as being much better than $3.25 billion serving just 5 kilometers on Sheppard. You'd have to tell them not to put the Finch information in the report, wouldn't you?
I think as Professor Miller has been saying, we focused on Sheppard, and they did focus on also the capital cost per capita, capital cost per kilometer for the options.
But you'd have to stay on Sheppard so they wouldn't know. They wouldn't know that for 1.9 billion you can change the world from here to here instead of here. You couldn't say that in the report, could you?
Because their scope was limited.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Madam Speaker, I wanted to question Dr. Gordon Chong.
Okay, yes, you can. No, yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's questions to any of the staff. The members of council that ask those questions chose for the professor. Any member can ask any of the staff questions. Deputy Mayor Holliday, question.
Dr. Chong, in your report, there were a couple of things that really struck home with me. One, you have a statement in there that by 2062, the population of the Greater Toronto Area is going to go from 6 million now to 12 million then. And just how did you arrive at that figure?
You're talking about the Back on Track report, not the panel report.
Yeah, not the panel report.
Yeah, we had consultants that were from Metrolinx, a sub of Metrolinx, SDG, and Barry Lyon Consulting. And Barry Lyon Consulting has had like 30 or 40 years of experience in estimating real estate trends and take-up. And those figures came from them, and Barry Lyon Consulting. And they were on the conservative side, the small c conservative side, for those projections.
Well, in view of that doubling of the population in the next 50 years, has that had a bearing on why you're in favor of subways as opposed to above ground?
I mean, I have to admit to a bias because I spent 10 years in the transit sector, both at the TTC and Go Transit. And I have yet to hear a compelling argument, irrespective of the professional staff involved, that would change my mind with respect to building subways and having a strong feeder bus system to complement the subway travel rather than making do with an LRT. And with respect to both capital and operating costs, the fact is after about 30, 40 years they pan out totally. And my question has always been, if you're thinking long term and not thinking purely of initial capital costs, why wouldn't you build for 50 to 100 years out? And so the population projections, complemented by the projections that our city planning staff have put forward as well, is that if there is a policy, an assertive policy, to take advantage of the center's concept that was actually promulgated over 30 years ago, you actually can produce the kind of numbers, both employment and residential. Residential has clearly outpaced the employment figures. And so when Professor Miller was responding earlier as an engineer, and I acknowledge I'm not neither an engineer or a planner, but I do listen to professional advice and try to assess it. They have made it clear that in the future, if you're looking at city building from a Toronto and a regional point of view, the city planners and the new deputy manager, Mr. Livy, John Livy, who has not only had experience at Metro, the former Metro, but in Markham as well, brings a wealth of experience and a different perspective to the city planning area now. And so while I'm skeptical of any projections that go beyond 10 to 20 years, I have to say that when I find somebody with the professional qualifications and experience of somebody like a John Livy, then I would give a lot more credence to those than those that come from a civil engineer or a dentist.
Well, and having said that, you've made your decision based on what the city's going to look like 50 years from now. What do you think the opinion will be, I guess, of the council and the public 50 years from now if we take our major streets and take away the capacity of their ability to carry vehicles, or at least reduce it, and we've selected a transit mode that doesn't move as many people as quickly as possible compared to the best source?
I mean, that's speculation as to what they may think, but I can only look back and realize that some of the things that had been done, if the young subway hadn't been built years ago, where would we be now? And, you know, you obviously saw the article yesterday. What I assume is that we can't really predict the future. So you should plan for the future 50 to 100 years. And when you look at the economic chaos in the world, the migration patterns now, people are not leaving North America to go to Europe, Asia, or Africa. In fact, they're leaving those continents to come to North America. And when they come to Canada and Ontario, they don't go to Timmins, they go to Toronto. So having seen the exponential growth in Scarborough, North York, Markham, Richmond Hill, etc., I would say that we should be planning for that 12 million and perhaps even more, because we can't see, and it would be much better not to saddle future generations with having to rip up something that
was your last question. Thank you.
That doesn't take that into consideration.
Thank you. Last question. Okay, please. No applause. Councillor Lee.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. My question is with regards to the long-term maintenance and operations of the subway against the LRT. Was that looked at during the study that the expert panel undertook? I'm still on the floor. And anybody that wants to answer the question.
We just completed the analysis in the last few days, so that was not available for the panel. But what I can tell you is that for the Sheppard Subway, for the Sheppard corridor, the subway will cost annually about $5 million more than LRT in maintenance and operation.
All right, $5 million a year more was okay. My understanding is that if you have a subway, you also have to run a feeder bus system, correct? Was that operational costs and maintenance included into that $5 million?
No, because the LRT would require the same thing, more or less.
Or the LRT also require the same thing?
When we have any rail type of transit, we feed it with buses. That's what TTC does.
No, I mean, do you have to run the bus along Sheppard as well, if you have LRT?
If I have subway, you mean?
If you have the LRT, would you run a bus system along?
No.
But you have the subway, you will run a bus system as well?
It depends on the station spacing, it depends. So it may or may not. But the $5 million did not include this component. The $5 million is to operate the subway and maintain the asset of the subway.
Okay, another issue that was brought up is that if we have the LRT, the current policy of stopping to allow passengers off between stops for people that need it, that won't be available on the LRT. Is there any way of mitigating that?
Well, the LRT will have a much shorter stop spacing. The subway will have a longer stop spacing, about 1 kilometer in between. So the LRT kind of addressed the problem by having a shorter stop spacing.
But still, it's not addressed the problem of stopping in between stops to let people off in the middle of the night when they could feel at risk. That's closer to where they want to get to.
We haven't got to that point yet, but you might be right, yeah.
And I also asked the question earlier of there's information out there that says that the subways will last for 100 years without, whereas the LRT will only last about 25, 30 years. What do you say to that?
Well, different assets last for different times. So a subway has tunnel, vehicle, signal system, elevator, escalator. Each type of this asset has different life cycle. So vehicle, for example, lasts 30 years. Tunnel supposedly lasts for 75 years. It doesn't mean that you're not going to do any maintenance in between. It means that you design this type of asset. So you can't say just a subway or LRT. It depends what type of asset need to replace at what interval.
All right. So even the subway tunnels, after a period of time, needs maintenance in terms of repairs, where the concrete falls because of soil conditions and so on, correct?
Absolutely. We're repairing the young subway tunnel right now after 50 years. And we've been repairing it for at least 7 years.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Perks.
Thank you very much. My first question's for I'm sorry, Councillor Kelly. My first question's for the CFO. I've just received advanced circulation of a motion from the budget chief suggesting we'll get $100 million from a new parking levy. Does that, in order to raise that, what kind of tax do we have to put on how many parking spots?
That would be for every non-residential parking stall in the city, so all the underground parking lots downtown, the plaza lots, the mall lots, the strip mall lots, every space available. And I believe the amount is, and that's about 900,000 spots, and I believe the rate is $100 a stall.
So if I own a strip mall, if I own that property, it's got 40 parking spots. That's $4,000 in extra tax on that strip mall every year.
Yes.
Okay. Earlier, in answer to questions from Councillor Davis, you said that looking at some of the new revenue tools just to fund the subway concerns you because it cannibalizes the tax base. Did I hear that right?
Yes, with respect to TIFs.
With respect to TIFs. From that, I would draw the conclusion that you think there are other capital pressures that are important for the city to deal with. What are the main ones?
Well, if you recall, in this year's capital budget, we restored $1.1 billion of TTC funding through $700 million in new financing that we still haven't achieved. The TTC had an ask in the previous year of almost double that. So I'm not sure what their needs are for the $1.1 billion that they took off the table. We also know that the TCHC has a considerable backlog on their properties in the hundreds of millions, and there's potential backlogs in other areas on the capital side.
The big ones are TTC and housing. Thank you. To the TTC. The chief financial officer has just told us that you have $1 billion or so in capital programs that we couldn't fund. Could you give me a sense of what some of those might be, just in broad terms?
Yes, okay. There are a number of capital programs that we've had to defer, things like installation of platform edge doors on the subway platforms and other items relating to state of good repair.
The state of good repair, as I recall, there's also there was a bus garage that we would have needed that we didn't fund.
That's correct.
So if we take all of our available revenue space, the TIFs and other things like that, put them to the Sheppard Subway, do you lose any capacity to deliver the level of service you have in the rest of the city?
Well, we haven't quantified the exact impact, but our priority would still be that state of good repair needs to be placed before any expansion, because state of good repair maintains the safety and the integrity of the existing system.
And if you can't do that, you would be delivering less service in the rest of the city. Is that correct?
If we were not able to maintain state of good repair, we would have to make tough choices about what we would need to do to maintain safe operation.
And if you don't have the money to do that safely, you would have to, as we did with the bus garage, we would be constrained in our ability to deliver service to the rest of the city. Is that correct?
We'd have to look at all options. That's
okay. To the city manager, the CFO mentioned that we have a capital backlog at Toronto Community Housing. Can you give me a sense, quantify how bad that is?
Through you, Madam Speaker, my recollection, the report to Council was close to $1 billion in 5 years and about $1.75 billion in 10 years in terms of the backlog.
And if we commit all of our available additional room, our development charges, our TIFs, all of that stuff to this subway piece, and we can't provide the money to TCHC, that $1 billion, does that mean a number of people who lose their homes? What does it mean?
Obviously, all the tenants of our homes would be affected by that backlog. So tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands of people at risk of not being housed.
Okay, Councillor Burks, that's not before us.
Actually, it is, Speaker.
It is. It's in here.
Not Toronto Housing. Toronto Housing is not in here. Okay, stop. Councillor Crawford to speak.
Question.
I mean, sorry, a question, yes. I apologize.
Questions for Dr. Chung, please. Dr. Chung.
Okay, yes, just one sec. I've got everyone's. Okay, Councillor Crawford, just advise members of council that Professor Miller is no longer with us. Okay.
I'll be asking questions of Dr. Chung. Dr. Chung, I want to ask some questions on transfers. When we're looking at the LRT, when you're looking at the LRT, there's going to be a transfer at Don Mills to get onto the subway if the LRT is built. Can you talk about the impacts of transferring on the ridership, I guess, capacity? Will more people travel on an LRT when you have to transfer compared to a subway when it's one through trip?
You don't have to be an engineer to realize that every time there's a transfer, it slows travel down and it discourages people from leaving their cars. The TTC itself estimates that you lose about 25% every time there's a transfer from one mode from one technology to another. So common sense says, people arrange their affairs to maximize their travel time and minimize their travel time and maximize their own comfort. So the more transfers, the fewer people are going to use a transit system.
So in using that, would the average person who's coming from Scarborough or in the East End, would they be more likely to get out of the car, to get on the Scarborough at Scarborough, to take the LRT or take the subway to get downtown? What would be the quickest route?
I think what I refer to as a one-seat ride, but normally not seat is the word I use, will attract the most people out of their cars. And in fact, my researcher is giving me notes, but I have relatives who live in Scarborough, and they've made it clear the travel mode that they use now and transferring from a bus to an SRT, etc., slows them down completely, and they would much prefer that we have a subway system in place, and they would actually be willing to pay for a subway instead of an LRT, and in fact say, if you're not going to have a subway, then why don't you just use the existing express bus until you can afford a subway?
Thank you. What was a funding plan submitted to the expert panel as part for the subway?
In fact, the funding plan, which people don't want to call it, is been back on track, the interim report. What it requires, it's a preliminary funding plan and a financing plan, but what it requires is the second phase of the P3 application to determine how and when we go to a request for proposals to finally, once and for all, determine whether the private sector is going to come to the table and for how much. Every financial institution I've consulted on an informal basis, including some of the pension funds, would love to get into investing in the transit system, a subway system, and would be willing to take risks in a P3 model. So, you know, if we proceed to that second phase, the city taxpayers will be able to find out once and for all what can the private sector do as a comparator to the traditional procurement method, which a retired TTC planner and civil engineer has indicated that, you know, 10 to 15% contingency is very normal, and in some circumstances 30% contingency is added to their estimates. So why, if you really want to protect taxpayers' interest, would you not do the P3, the second phase of the P3 application, when you have that potential to give the best value for money to Toronto taxpayers?
Okay, and my last question, with regard to capacity on the in 2031 ridership with an LRT, is it not true that the capacity in 9 of the intersections along the Sheppard corridor will actually be at capacity in 2031 and in fact overcrowded?
Yes, the answer is right. And if I could also refer the second part of the question to Dr. Joe Canelli, who is a geographer and an economist by training, not an engineer. So I'll let her answer that second part. Push the yellow thing.
The answer to this is from the 2008 environmental assessment for the LRT. And that assessment said that there will be 9 intersections that are currently at capacity along the Sheppard corridor.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Your time has expired. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Speaker. I think probably this, I'm moving around in some of my questions, but going back to the first approval for the Sheppard Subway was 2007. I think I'm asking Mr. Byford and Mr. Gallagher. Speaker, could you stop my time, please? Because Councillor Shiner is now on the staff side. And yes, I do. Thank you. I wonder if you could just start it again, because my questions were for these gentlemen from the TTC, and Councillor Shiner was having private questions answered at that time. That's okay. I'm asking publicly.
Okay, folks, let's stick to business here.
I'm just asking for you to start that again, please. Thank you very much. No. The first time that the LRT on Sheppard was approved had to do with the what's called the Move 2020, or the Big Move. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was in 2007, I believe, beginning of July?
I believe so, yes.
And the funding for that LRT on Sheppard East was coming out of a $8.4 billion envelope that was coming through the province. Was it from Metrolinx?
Yes, from the province through Metrolinx.
From
yes.
the province to Metrolinx, and it was up to Metrolinx to disseminate those funds.
Yes.
And one of the projects that they agreed to was the one on Sheppard, the LRT?
Yes.
From Don Mills to
Morningside.
To Morningside, all of the 13 kilometers. And was there any type of approval? Did Metrolinx look at any other rapid transit on Sheppard? Did they compare this to a busway or compare it to the subway, which was part of the city's plan, and then the LRT, or did they simply say, okay, LRT, no problem? What was their process?
Well, Metrolinx is mandated to do due diligence and review of all the submission by any transit agency or city, whether TTC, City of Toronto, York, whatever. So we submit our justification, our project, they do their own due diligence before they approve it. They prepare what they call a business case, and they look at all the transit option, and they do value for money. Then they provide their approval.
So they did look at a subway versus an LRT, and they chose the subway.
I believe so, yeah.
I mean, they chose the LRT on Sheppard, Metrolink.
I believe that's correct.
All right. Now, there had to be an environmental assessment that went along with this particular project, was there not?
Absolutely, yeah.
When did that start?
2007.
The environmental assessment for the Sheppard LRT started in 2007.
Yes.
And then it was submitted for approval to council. Do you remember the date?
8.
Was it July?
July 2008, Councillor.
Yes, and if I can just go to city staff now around the reports, because it was through reports to council in July that the Sheppard LRT environmental assessment was approved. And within that report, I think you note that there was 400 people who had come out to the open houses. Is that correct?
I don't have a note of the number of people. What I do have is the reports that approved the official plan amendment that implemented the EA process.
Well, one of the documents that's attached to the expert panel report are all the city approvals, and one of the approvals was in July 2008, and I believe that was Planning and Growth 17.8, approved Sheppard LRT EA. Did it not include the number of people who had come out and had something to say? I'll let you look for that, but in the meantime, is there anywhere in that approval, in the document before City Council, where anyone said that if they couldn't have a subway, they didn't want the LRT?
I don't have that as a record. That wouldn't have been.
Would that not be a record of comment in the environmental assessment?
That may have been. I don't know if Mr. McPhail has any information on that.
I note, would you agree, Mr. McPhail, that in the environmental assessment report that the people who were a part of that environmental assessment, the 400, actually seemed quite skeptical. They seemed to like the project, but they were a little skeptical that it would never get built. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
So I guess they were right, because here we are today trying to change the project that they came out to. So those were 400 people who came out to an open house and you've been in contact with, or through the EA they've been involved somehow in this process. Was that a public process in the City of Toronto under certain guidelines and requirements from the Ministry of the Environment?
Yes, it was.
And was it advertised in the newspapers?
That's correct.
And there were 400 people. 100 of those people, I believe, came from Councillor Kelly's ward, Ward 40. Is that not right?
I don't know if there was 100, but I was at the meetings and there was a number of people there, a lot of people.
I believe your report says it was 100 at that particular meeting. There were 4 meetings.
10 seconds.
These agenda items were approved on consent, 2 on consent, and 1 for the approval of the EA was actually approved on a simple majority. Is that not correct?
That's my recollection.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Your time has expired. Councillor Mihevc.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My questions are to our CFO, who's being blocked by Councillor Ford. Thank you. So I just want to get this straight with this particular motion. So my first question is, we have 900,000 stalls in the City of Toronto, parking stalls. Is that your rough calculation?
That's my understanding, Councillor.
And these are everything from green pea lots to malls to the back of stores, for example, on St. Clair, Eglinton, Bloor Street, basically yes. every commercial. So what would the economic impact of charging them? My math says it'll be about $110 a stall per year, and it says perpetual, forever. What would be the economic impact of imposing that?
Well, that's not an insignificant burden, and as Hempson pointed out in their report back in 2006, that goes counter to our economic competitiveness tax policy.
So that would not be, from your recommendation, not be a wise way to fund this?
It poses challenges. It hasn't been tested in terms of acceptance.
Okay, that's helpful. Second question, do you recommend the KPMG financing model that was presented?
No, I wouldn't. We've
Sorry, I can't.
No, I wouldn't. We've identified a number of challenges with that approach.
So the senior staff of our finance department is not supporting the KPMG report on the financing side. Why?
Well, Councillor, the KPMG report was good work. It identified that there was a shortfall. It identified that, for example, the real estate revenues, we've already allocated those to the $700 million TTC shortfall, and we've already spoken to the issues around TIFs and DCs.
Right. Okay. So there's a weakness there. So let's assume that we pass a 1A and we have $100 million a year. Some people might think that all the lines that are listed on 2 Roman numeral 1 to 7, that they're going to be coming down the pipe. My math says that we have at least $1 billion, probably closer to $2 billion shortfall just for the Sheppard line. Is my math correct in assuming that with $100 million, and let's assume that you pay as you go, which is not actually what they're assuming. They're assuming that we would take on some debt to get it done by 2020. My math says that it would take us anywhere between 10 and 20 years just to finish the Sheppard Subway from Don Mills to the Scarborough Town Centre. Is that a valid way of thinking of it if we had the $100 million annually from the parking levy?
The $100 million, to put it in perspective, if we issued a 30-year debenture at 4%, which is roughly what we could do now, we could issue a $1.7 billion debenture.
So we would be paying for that
for 30 years.
For 30 years.
Yes.
So 30 years. So the downtown relief line, we could not be thinking of the downtown relief line unless we added another $100 million tax on parking for the downtown relief line, the rapid transit service for waterfront and the Portlands, the Sheppard line to the zoo, the extension of the Bloor Danforth to Sherway Gardens. None of that would be able to be considered for 30 years unless additional taxes were imposed. Is that correct?
That's correct, and we outlined what we would consider to be, councils should consider in terms of longer-term considerations in the panel report on pages 33 to 36.
Okay, so basically we have something here that says add $100 million to our business community, including our small business community, for a line that would serve less people versus a paid-for line, 13 kilometers paid for by the province of Ontario that we could have finished within 2 years. In your professional assessment as the CFO of this city, which gives you value for money in a better way? I'm asking you for your professional, from a value for money point of view, speaking truth to power.
And that'll be your last question, Councillor Mhevick.
If it was purely on, because there are lots of other considerations before council, but on a purely, I would take the money in hand.
Thank you, Councillor Mhevick. Now, before we proceed with Councillor McConnell, can I just make a comment here? The general noise level has gradually risen to a point where I think it's now time to ask everyone just to cut out the side conversations, would you please? It's getting a little bit difficult to concentrate on the discussion down here in the arena. Councillor McConnell.
That's what I thought, yes. So I have a couple of questions about timing. And I just first of all want to say I have sort of an interest in this, not pecuniary, but Isabel and Charlotte, my grandbabies, do live at the end of what would be the LRT, and I just want to make sure that not only can I get to see them before they go to university, they were just born last year and the year before, but that actually we have a chance doing it in my lifetime. So my question, and I'm not an expert at this, but my question has to do with how long does it take to build one particular mode over another? And so I do know that in my lifetime, since Council has amalgamated, we were able to extend, at the request of the province, not ours, up to Vaughan. And how close are we, and how long did that process, will that subway take? It's a TDC I'm looking at. Yeah, it's your answer.
I'm sorry, Councillor. I was reflecting on the motion. Could you just repeat the question, please?
Yes, absolutely. Could you restart my time, please?
Well, I'll stop your time so you can ask the question again.
All right, that would be great. That would be perfect. Thank you. So my question was, how long is it going to take for us to go to build the York University line through its completion? What will be the timing of how long to dig those tunnels and get it up and running? What's the timing on that, please?
Okay. This construction's underway at the moment.
Yes.
The expected completion date is 2018. Just afterwards, yeah. We're expected just after the Pan Am Gates, which is 2015. So latest time will be 2016.
Sorry, the length of time that it took.
The actual construction time is.
Yes.
I think it's 7 years, end to end.
End to end was
7 years.
Okay, and the end to end, if you were to build the next set of subway, which will be Eglinton, what's with the LRT, what's the end-to-end on that?
The projected date for Eglinton, using the Metrolinx date, is 2020.
Right. So given and keeping in mind Charlotte and Isabel, I'm just wondering when it would be that you would expect that we could complete subways as being proposed by Councillor Delgrand and others.
So just so I've understood the question, when do we think we would complete the Sheppard Subway?
Yes.
Is that the question? Sorry.
For the Sheppard Subway, it would be around 2021.
Oh, 2021. Okay, so they're getting up there now. Where would you be going to? Where's the end of that subway?
It depends on alignment, but the one we have right now is going to Kennedy, then it turns south to Scarborough City Centre.
Right. So as I just reminded you, Charlotte and Isabel actually live at Sheppard and Morningside. So they would be in the neighborhood of another 10 years from now that we would get out to the town centre. Not very close to them. Hopefully, I guess by then they'll be driving. What about if you put the LRT? The LRT, how long?
It will go all the way to Morganside. Actually, it's going to Conley's Road just for the maintenance storage facility. So go all the way to Morganside.
And how long?
13 kilometers.
Pardon me?
13 kilometers.
No. How long will
5
it
years.
take to get to Isabel and Charlotte?
5 years.
5 years. So we could do it before they get in university, or we could do it before they get in school. Is that kind of the difference? And not only that, it sounds to me, unless I'm missing what you're saying, is you will only get to the Scarborough Centre and they'll need to drive and pick their nana up there. Is that right?
I don't know how old they are, but the LRT will...
I just told you they've just been born. One is a year and one is 2.
Yeah, they can take the LRT when they're in kindergarten.
Yes, great. So it might be better for Nana because Nana might not be around actually when you get out to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McConnell. Councillor Berardinetti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, through you. Okay, so this question is, of the two options, looking at LRT or Subway, what is the capacity of the LRT? This is to Gordon Chong. Over the long term. So if Metrolinx is saying that it's 10 to 15 years for capacity at LRT, what about the Subway?
Councillor, I'm going to defer that to Dr. Kennelly again, because she's got the detail for that response.
No,
I'd like to hear from
sorry,
Dr.
Dr. Chong, that's already been considered by Council, and Dr. Kennelly is not before us. So we need the information for you. I've stopped the time for the questioner.
Mr. Speaker, she is my staff support, and both the TTC and Metrolinx are considered staff, so she's my staff support.
The matter came before Council earlier this morning, and the decision was made.
Council voted. Council voted.
Okay, Councillor Chong, you're welcome to answer the question.
From the option from Scarborough, from Don Mills to...
Sorry, Dr. Chong, the Mayor on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, Dr. Kennelly already answered a question. She answered a question, so why can we say that?
How dare she?
How can she speak one time and she can't answer a question the second time? We can't change the rules in the middle of the game.
Thank you very much. That frankly was my oversight. I wasn't aware of who was responding to the question at the time. I looked up, I saw who it was, and the answer was already on the record. So sorry about that, but I was more alert this time. The matter came before Council earlier this morning. A vote was taken. The decision was made. We are all bound by that decision unless we want to reopen the matter. So, Dr. Chong, you're welcome to answer the question.
To Consumers Road, the subway option is 11,000. From Sheppard and Yonge is 13,700, and Downsview, the entire length would be 6,500.
Okay, and how does this change over time? So say 10 to 15 years out.
The change over time, we don't have exact numbers, and nobody can produce exact numbers, as I said in my earlier remarks. But the change over time, with development being best promoted by Subway, is likely to increase exponentially.
Okay, and of the two options in terms of economic growth, and if we're talking about employment hubs or retail or jobs along the avenue, which one maximizes potential economic growth?
Direct discussions with developers has indicated clearly that Subway leads to the biggest amount of development going forward. LRT does lead to some, but the greatest increase will come from Subway construction. The economic output in billions of dollars from a subway is about $3.8 billion. And you have an example in front of you now. The Stumpway from Yonge to Don Mills was about $1 billion to construct, and it's produced, depending on the estimates, $2 billion of additional development, and economic development pushes the number up to about $4 billion. And in terms of employment, for person years, it's 22,800 jobs that would be produced, and business sales would be about $7.2 billion.
Okay, and in terms of the seamlessness of the system, if we're thinking long term and we're looking at a seamless system with people getting on and off, would people be transferring, if it's the LRT, people are transferring at Don Mills, is that correct, onto a subway?
As I said earlier as well, a one-seat ride does produce the greatest change for any attempt to try and get people out of their cars. And if you're going to with respect to the people who support the LRT, if you're going to serve the greatest number of people in the designated priority neighborhoods, such as the Jane Finch area, Steeles Lammer Road, Dorset Park, Weston Mount Dennis, any of those areas, while the LRT does a certain job, I believe you should provide those people with the best service as well, and the best service is the subway. Does it mean that you can build it all at once? No, it does not mean that. But if I were living in one of those neighborhoods, and I did grow up downtown, I don't think we should be giving them what amounts to a second class rather than first class, which is subway.
Councillor Mammoliti, please, you know what the rules are. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, just to amplify on that, if you are building subways, you do need a very vast, comprehensive feeder bus system. And that is what should be done to complement the subway growth. There is, in my view, there is no better way to do that. And what we should be doing is finding the funds and the financing to do that.
Okay, and so if there is not seamless, not a seamless system, what is the percentage of the ridership loss with each transfer point?
As I said earlier, I think the TTC even has a number, a rough estimate of 25% are lost for every transfer that is taken, that has to be done. The demographics that you're going for really are two. You've got two markets. You've got the choice rider and you've got the transit dependent or transit captive. If you want to provide the best service to the transit captive people, you should be providing a subway. If you want to try and get people out of their cars, you should be providing the fastest, the rapid, reliable, and frequent service, and really nothing can beat a subway. When you take public mass transit off an existing roadway, you're going to increase its speed. And you can argue over whether it's 22 kilometers, 30 kilometers an hour, or 15. But the truth is, it doesn't take an engineer to figure out that you put a subway underground.
Okay, that was the last question. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Ford, and then we'll break. Councillor Ford.
My question is to Andy Byford. Andy, in your personal opinion, and with your expertise in transit, if you had the money, what would you build on Sheppard Avenue, an LRT or a subway?
So, Councillor, if I'm understanding your question correctly, are you saying that is ring-fence money for specifically for Sheppard?
Yes. If you had funding for Sheppard, would you build LRTs or would you build subways?
Well, on the understanding, on the basis that I would always want to make sure that state of good repair came first, to make sure that there wasn't an opportunity cost for funding. In my professional opinion, this city needs more subways, and I would prefer to build a subway on Sheppard.
Thank you. Next question.
Okay, please. Please.
If you had secured funding for the entire city to build a transit network of subways or LRTs, what would you build?
As I said in my previous answer, I think that this city needs to address the issue of subway capacity going forward. Certainly, there is a pressing need to review the downtown relief line because the pressure on the Young Line isn't going to go away, even with automatic train control and Toronto Rockets. There is a need for more capacity. Similarly, there is a need to get rapid transit through to Pearson Airport. I think there is a place for LRTs, but certainly I would like to see subway expansion within the city. I think we're going to have to address that point fairly soon.
Thank you, Mr. Byford. My next question, is the professor available?
No, the professor has left the building.
I was going to ask him what his financial qualifications were. But I'll move on to Dr. Gordon Chong.
Okay,
Dr. Gordon
okay, Councillor McConnell, enough. Stop interrupting.
Well, since the professor is making numerous opinions on costs,
Councillor Ford, who do you want the
professional expertise on finances?
Who's the question?
Which is zero.
Okay. So your question, Councillor
Ford?
I
know the answer already.
Okay.
Dr. Chong, on Sheppard Avenue, how many businesses will be impacted by the LRT?
Businesses are always impacted by the LRT, any surface transit, either during construction or operation. I mean, you don't need to be an engineer or a financial expert to know that.
How many?
Or a dentist, for that matter. Thanks. The former mayor just reminded me I'm a dentist.
How many jobs will be impacted by the LRT?
About 300 jobs will be displaced by the LRT.
Okay. How many community facilities will be impacted by the LRT?
2.
How many intersections will be impacted by the LRT?
21 intersections will be impacted.
So 21 intersections were going to be impacted through construction of an LRT. It would turn into chaos.
Its intersections with access restricted, signalized intersections affected would be 32. So you probably have about 50 odd that are going to be affected in some way.
How many people work within 800 meters of the LRT or subway? Or did the TTC just look at residential?
The expert panel didn't ask that question, so I don't have a number or an opinion.
So the largest impact on subways is job creation, and the TTC did not look at that 800-meter zone around subway stations.
Well, it didn't get the attention.
Okay, so it was totally ignored by the TTC.
Wait. The panel did. I don't know about the TTC.
Well, that's where they get their information, the preordained, group. What? It's true. The American Public Transportation Association, the American Public Transportation Association stated the LRT has the highest operating cost out of all modes of transit. Do you agree or disagree with this authority?
It's not my position to agree or disagree with APTA. APTA is the American counterpart of CUTA, which is the Canadian Urban Transit Association, and APTA publishes annually those statistics. And year after year, it has said that LRT has the highest operating costs. People can go to their website and check that.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Mammoliti, stop interrupting Councillor Fletcher. We're recessed to 2 o'clock.